Shaquille O'Neal is assaulted by racist police officer and receives the lesson of his life. Shaquille O'Neal's life had always been defined by his extraordinary presence. As one of the most recognizable figures in professional basketball history, he had grown accustomed to drawing attention wherever he went. But on this particular evening, as his black SUV cruised through the peaceful suburban streets, he found himself at the center of attention for all the wrong reasons. The gentle hum of his engine was suddenly interrupted by the harsh flash of blue lights in his rearview mirror. Shaq's heart rate quickened, not from fear but from a familiar sense of anticipation. He'd been through similar situations before, though each time felt like the first. With practiced composure, he guided his vehicle to the curb, maintaining the dignified demeanor that had become his trademark, both on and off the court. The police officer emerged from his patrol car, his stance rigid and his expression severe. Despite his average height, the officer carried himself with an air of inflated authority that seemed to compensate for the physical disparity between himself and the vehicle's occupant. His hand rested deliberately on his belt as he approached, the SUV flashlight beam cutting through the evening shadows. Without any proper introduction or explanation, the officer barked out his first command, his tone carrying an edge that seemed unnecessary for a routine traffic stop. The beam of his flashlight swept across Shaq's face, lingering longer than necessary. Shaq reached slowly for his documents, his movements deliberate and calm. "Of course, officer. May I ask what the reason for the stop is?" The officer's jaw tightened visibly. "Step out of the vehicle." "I don't understand, sir. I've provided my documents and I'd like to know why I'm being stopped." The situation quickly drew attention from passers-by. Phones emerged from pockets and purses, their cameras capturing the escalating tension. Several onlookers recognized Shaquille O'Neal, the basketball legend, whose presence commanded respect both on and off the court. "I said step out of the vehicle." The officer's voice rose, his hand now gripping his baton. The unnecessary aggression in his stance was clear to everyone watching. Shaq maintained his composure, though his deep voice carried a note of justified concern. "Officer, I'm respectfully asking for clarification. I've complied with your initial request, and I believe I deserve to know why I'm being asked to exit my vehicle." By now, a small crowd had gathered, their presence adding another layer of complexity to the situation. Whispers rippled through the onlookers, many of whom couldn't believe they were witnessing such an aggressive display of authority toward someone of Shaq's stature and reputation. The crowd continued to grow, with more and more people pulling out their phones to record the incident. The blue lights from the police car created an eerie backdrop to the unfolding scene, casting long shadows across the suburban street that had suddenly become center stage for this tense confrontation. "Last warning," the officer growled, his knuckles white around the baton. "Exit the vehicle now." Shaq took a deep breath, his mind racing through years of similar encounters, remembering the importance of maintaining dignity in the face of injustice. With careful movements, he opened his door, his impressive frame unfolding from the SUV. The officer took an involuntary step back, momentarily startled by Shaq's full height, but quickly reasserted his aggressive stance. "Hands where I can see." "Them." The gathering crowd's murmurs grew louder, phones recording every moment. Among the onlookers were people of all ages and backgrounds, united in their disbelief at the officer's inappropriate behavior toward such a respected figure in their community. Shaquille O'Neal stood perfectly still, his hands visible, his voice steady. "Officer, I can see that you're very agitated, but I want you to know that I respect your authority. However, I also expect to be treated with the dignity every citizen deserves. Whatever your concerns are, we can address them professionally and respectfully." The tension in the air was palpable as the moment stretched between them. The officer's grip on his baton tightened, while the phones continued recording, their lenses capturing every nuance of this pivotal encounter that would soon spark a nationwide conversation about power, respect, and the need for change in law and enforcement practices. The video of Shaquille O'Neal's encounter with the aggressive officer spread across social media platforms like wildfire. By morning, the incident had become the catalyst for a broader conversation about police conduct and community relations. News stations ran the footage on loop, each replay revealing new details that painted a stark picture of the unnecessary escalation. At the police, department senior officials sat in an emergency meeting, their expressions grave as they reviewed the footage for the third time. The department's phone lines hadn't stopped ringing since dawn, and email inboxes were flooded with messages from concerned citizens and media outlets. The incident had sparked intense internal discussions about proper procedures and the importance of respectful interaction with all citizens. "This isn't what we stand for," one superior officer muttered, reaching for their phone to call for immediate action. The room was filled with tension as they discussed the implications of their officer's behavior and the necessary steps forward. Across town, in his spacious office, Shaquille O'Neal sat with his team of advisors. The morning sun cast long shadows. Across the basketball memorabilia lining the walls, silent testimonies to a career built on discipline and perseverance. "We need to handle this carefully," one advisor suggested, his expression thoughtful. "This isn't just about you anymore, Shaq. You've become a symbol for something much bigger." Shaq nodded, his expression serious. "I keep thinking about all the young people watching this unfold. What message does this send to them? That no matter who you are, no matter what you've achieved, you can still be treated with such disrespect." Their conversation was interrupted by calls from various media outlets. The coverage had already garnered national attention, but now journalists wanted to dig deeper, to explore the systemic issues that had led to this moment. Meanwhile, at the police department, the officer involved sat through a stern meeting with his superiors. The weight of his actions from the previous night pressed heavily upon him as he faced criticism from his peers and supervisors. His aggressive behavior had not only violated department protocols, but had also damaged the community's trust in law enforcement. Throughout the city, in community centers and coffee shops, on social media and news broadcasts, the conversation continued to evolve. Shaquille O'Neal's dignified response to aggression had struck a chord with people from all walks of life. His calm demeanor in the face of unnecessary hostility became a talking point for community leaders, organizing town halls to discuss police reform and community relations. The incident sparked intense internal discussions within the police department. Other officers began to reflect on their own conduct and the importance of treating all citizens with respect and dignity. The department announced immediate measures to review and enhance their training procedures, particularly focusing on de-escalation techniques and bias awareness. As the day progressed, the officer's superiors took decisive action. They openly criticized his use of excessive authority and the unprofessional manner in which he conducted the traffic stop. The message was clear: such behavior would not be tolerated, regardless of who the citizen was. The officer, now facing the consequences of his actions, began to show signs of understanding the gravity of his mistake. The public outcry, combined with the disappointment of his colleagues and superiors, forced him to confront his own biases and misconceptions about authority. Social media continued to buzz with activity as more people shared their thoughts and experiences. Comments poured in from across the country, with many praising Shaquille O'Neal's composure and using the incident as a platform to discuss broader issues of respect and accountability in law enforcement. Expert commentators began appearing on news programs, analyzing the incident from various angles. They highlighted how Shaq's response provided a masterclass in maintaining dignity while asserting one's rights, and how the officer's aggressive behavior exemplified the need for continued reform in police training and conduct. As evening approached, the department announced that the officer would be required to participate in additional training focused on proper interaction with citizens and de-escalation techniques. This announcement was met with approval from community leaders, who saw it as a first step toward meaningful change. As the week progressed, the incident between Shaquille O'Neal and the police officer became a turning point for the entire community. The officer, now required to attend specialized training workshops, found himself confronting uncomfortable truths about his behavior and attitudes. Sitting in the training room surrounded by experts in conflict resolution and community policing, the officer watched video footage of his encounter with Shaq. Each frame revealed something new about his actions: the unnecessary aggression, the escalation of tension, The complete departure from his training. His colleagues' eyes were on him, not with judgment but with a shared recognition that this moment could lead to meaningful change. The workshop facilitator, Dr. Sarah Martinez, a respected expert in police community relations, paused the video. "Let's discuss what we observe here," she said, her voice calm but firm. "What could have been done differently?" The officer shifted in his seat, the weight of his actions pressing heavily on his conscience. For the first time, he began to see his behavior through the eyes of others, not just his superiors or fellow officers, but through the lens of the community he had sworn to protect and serve. Meanwhile, Shaquille O'Neal was channeling the incident's momentum into positive action. In his foundation's office, he met with community leaders to discuss expanding their youth outreach programs. The walls were adorned with photos of basketball camps and charity events, reminders of his long-time commitment to building bridges between law enforcement and the community. "We have an opportunity here," Shaq explained to the assembled group. "This isn't about pointing fingers or assigning blame. It's about creating understanding and fostering real change." The Foundation's newest initiative would focus on bringing together young people and law enforcement officers in constructive dialogue. Through basketball games, mentorship programs, and open forums, they would work to break down barriers and build mutual respect. Back at the police department, the training sessions were having a profound effect. The officer found himself sharing experiences with colleagues, many of whom had faced similar moments of realization about their own conduct. The discussions went beyond mere procedure, delving into the human impact of their actions and the importance of empathy in law enforcement. During one particularly moving session, a young community member shared her perspective on police interactions. Her words struck a chord with the officer. "We don't expect perfection," she said, "but we do expect respect. When you wear that badge, you carry the weight of our trust." The media continued to follow the story's development, but the narrative was shifting. Instead of focusing solely on the confrontation, reporters began covering the positive changes emerging from the incident. Local news stations featured stories about the officers' participation in the workshop and Shaq's expanded community initiatives. Dr. Martinez's training sessions incorporated role-playing exercises, putting officers in situations that challenged their assumptions and helped them develop better responses to high-stress encounters. The officer found himself gaining new insights into the power of communication and the importance of approaching each situation with an open mind. One afternoon, during a break in the training, the officer stood before a mirror in the department's bathroom. He studied his reflection, seeing beyond the uniform to the person underneath. The face that looked back at him was different now, humbled, more thoughtful, carrying the weight of lessons learned. Throughout the community, the ripple effects of change continued to spread. Other police departments began requesting information about the training program. Community organizations reported increased interest in their police-community partnership initiatives. The incident had become a catalyst for systemic change, transforming a moment of tension into an opportunity for growth. As evening fell over the city, Shaquille O'Neal sat in his office, reviewing proposals for new community programs. His phone buzzed with messages of support and suggestions for collaboration. He smiled, knowing that sometimes the most significant changes come from the most challenging moments. 2 weeks after the incident, the local community center buzzed with anticipation. Shaquille O'Neal had organized a unique event, a day of dialogue and basketball, bringing together police officers, including the officer from the incident, and community members. The gymnasium's polished floors gleamed under the fluorescent lights, basketball hoops standing as silent witnesses to what was about to unfold. The officer arrived early, his casual clothes a stark contrast to his usual uniform. His hands fidgeted slightly as he entered the building, memories of the past week's training sessions fresh in his mind. The weight of his personal transformation was evident in his demeanor, more open, more thoughtful, yet still carrying the uncertainty of someone stepping into unfamiliar territory. Shaq greeted each arrival personally, his imposing presence now a source of comfort rather than intimidation. When he reached the officer, their eyes met in a moment of silent understanding. This wasn't about reopening wounds, it was about healing them. "Thank you for coming," Shaq said, extending his hand. The officer took it, feeling the strength in the basketball legend's grip. "This is how we move forward, together." The event began with small group discussions, breaking down barriers through shared stories and experiences. Young people spoke about their fears and hopes regarding law enforcement. Officers shared their perspectives on serving the community. The officer found himself opening up about his journey of self-reflection since the incident. "I've learned that authority isn't about power," he admitted to his group. "It's about responsibility and trust." As the morning progressed, the atmosphere lightened. Basketball games began, mixing teams of officers and community members. Shaq moved from court to court, offering tips and encouragement, his laughter infectious. The squeak of sneakers on hardwood and the thump of basketballs created a rhythm that seemed to echo the beating heart of community unity. During a water break, the officer found himself talking with a teenage boy who had witnessed the original incident. The young man's perspective was eye-opening, helping the officer understand the long-lasting impact that police interactions can have on young minds. "When I saw how you treated Shaq," the teenager said, "I wondered how you'd treat someone like me. But being here today, seeing you like this, it shows people can change." Across the gymnasium, community leaders and police officials watched the interactions with approval. What they saw was more than just a feel-good event. It was the beginning of a new approach to community policing. Officers were letting their guards down, sharing jokes and high-fives with community members who just weeks ago might have viewed them with suspicion. Shaquille O'Neal took a moment to address the gathered crowd. His words carried the weight of experience and the hope of possibility. "What happened 2 weeks ago could have divided us," he said. "Instead, we chose to use it as a foundation for understanding. That's what champions do. They turn challenges into opportunities." The officer found himself nodding along with Shaq's words. His own journey from that tense night to this moment of connection had been transformative. The training sessions had given him tools and insights, but this event was showing him the real-world impact of changed behavior and open hearts. As the day continued, more barriers fell. Officers shared stories about why they joined the force, tales of wanting to make a difference, of following family traditions of service, of believing in the possibility of positive change. Community members spoke about their dreams for their neighborhoods and their willingness to work with law enforcement to achieve those dreams. The event concluded with a friendly tournament, teams mixed with officers and community members competing side by side. The officer found himself on a team with the teenage boy he'd spoken to earlier. Their teamwork on the court reflected the larger message of the day, that trust and cooperation yield better results than confrontation and fear. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the gymnasium windows, Shaquille O'Neal gathered everyone for a final word. The atmosphere was different now from when the day began, lighter, more hopeful, filled with the possibility of what could be achieved when people chose understanding over anger, dialogue over confrontation. 3 months after the incident that sparked a community-wide transformation, the changes in both the police department and the community were evident. The story of Shaquille O'Neal and the officer had evolved from a tense confrontation into a powerful narrative of personal growth and systemic change. The officer, once known for his aggressive approach, had become an advocate for reform within the department. His journey from that fateful night to his current role as a mentor for new recruits represented more than just personal transformation. It symbolized the possibility of change within the entire law enforcement system. On a crisp morning, he stood before a class of police academy cadets sharing his experience. "I used to think authority meant control," he explained, his voice carrying the weight of hard-won wisdom. "Now I understand it means responsibility. Every interaction we have has the potential to either build or break trust with our community." Across town, Shaquille O'Neal was meeting with his foundation's board to review the success of their expanded community programs. The initiatives born from the incident had exceeded all expectations. The basketball courts that once hosted tense encounters between police and youth now witnessed regular friendly games and mentoring sessions. What we've created here isn't just about sports, Shaq explained to a documentary crew filming the program's success. It's about breaking down barriers and building understanding. When you share a court with someone, when you work together as teammates, you start seeing past uniforms and stereotypes. The department's training program, revolutionized after the incident, had become a model for other cities. Dr. Martinez's workshops now included regular community participation, bringing real-world perspectives into officer training. The changes weren't just superficial, they represented a fundamental shift in how law enforcement approached their role in the community. One afternoon, during a community advisory board meeting, the officer and Shaquille O'Neal found themselves sitting side by side, reviewing proposals for new initiatives. The awkwardness of their first encounter had transformed into a productive partnership focused on positive change. Sometimes the best lessons come from our biggest mistakes, the officer admitted during the meeting. What matters is what we do with those lessons. The impact extended beyond their immediate community. News outlets that had initially covered the confrontation now returned to document the transformation. They found a police department actively engaged with its community, officers participating in youth programs and citizens working alongside law enforcement to build a safer, more understanding environment. Local businesses reported improved relationships with police patrols. Community members noted a marked difference in how officers approached routine interactions. The tension that had once characterized police presence in certain neighborhoods had been replaced by a sense of partnership and mutual respect. The officers' personal journey had become part of the department's training curriculum. New recruits watched footage of both the initial incident and the subsequent transformation, learning valuable lessons about the importance of approach, tone, and respect in every interaction. Shaquille O'Neal's foundation had expanded its reach, implementing similar programs in other cities. The basketball legend's response to adversity had created a blueprint for turning confrontation into conversation, conflict into collaboration. During a ceremony marking the 3-month anniversary of the community initiative, citizens and officers gathered at the renovated community center. The walls, once bare, now displayed photographs documenting the journey, from tense confrontation to collaborative celebration. As Shaq addressed the gathered crowd, his words resonated with the profound truth of their shared experience. What we've built here isn't just about one incident or one person. It's about recognizing that every challenge carries the seed of opportunity. When we choose to grow from our mistakes, to learn from our differences, we create something powerful. We create community. The officer, standing among his fellow officers and community members, felt the truth of those words. His journey, from that night of confrontation to this moment of celebration, had taught him the most valuable lesson of his career. That true authority comes not from force, but from understanding, respect, and the willingness to grow. As the ceremony concluded, the gathered crowd moved to the basketball courts for another friendly game. Officers and citizens, young and old, all playing together, a living testament to the power of transformation and the enduring strength of community bonds rebuilt on a foundation of mutual respect and understanding. Fairki Fing Sawa Sentuman Tut Piati